Hi, I'm Terrell Turner, the host of the Business Talk Library, and today I have another special guest on, Andrea Uvanni. And the reason why I think this guest is special is because this guest can speak directly to startups and fintechs, and she's located in North Carolina. So I always like to have other guests from North Carolina on. So welcome to the show, Andrea.
Thank you, Terrell. Happy to be here, and I hope that I can provide some great insight.
Absolutely. I have no doubt about that. I've seen some of the things that you've done on Instagram, and I saw that you were recently on another podcast. So I'm absolutely sure you will definitely do that. But before we jump into that, tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, I originally started with going to school for civil engineering. And after my first job with civil engineering, I realized that was really not what I wanted to do. So I started expanding into project management, but building off of that civil engineering and going into the construction side for project management, and expanded that even further into semiconductor and life sciences pharmaceutical project management. And one of the things that I found through all of this, and then working with other smaller businesses, is that there's a lot of project management aspects that can easily be expanded into business operations to really help build on efficiencies.
Wow. So what was that journey like? I mean, what was that aha thing that kind of made you realize civil engineering was not the path?
It was really, going into civil engineering originally, I went through and I spent 5 years doing FEMA flood maps.
Wow.
And when you're looking at, and there's a redundancy in every career, but after going through and just looking at data points and elevations and the flood zones, there's no creative aspect to it after a little while. And then I went into urban planning, green infrastructure, and that had more to it, but it still wasn't necessarily thrilling, and it wasn't challenging to me. So I wanted to find something where each time I went through, I could have something that was new, different, challenging, and could provide growth. So semiconductor was really where I found that first really big challenge. I had done some other project management prior to that with national chains. And those were, again, they became cookie cutter. And I think, unless you're baking cookies, nothing should be cookie cutter. Everything is unique. Everything is different, has those challenges and changes. And so I wanted that to be reflected in my career. Semiconductor, you go into something like that where you're in clean rooms. Clean rooms that are 100 times cleaner than your operating rooms.
Wow.
And they're building microchips for cell phones, microchips that are going in NASA rockets. All this stuff. The facility that I worked in, across the globe, they were building pieces that we can only fathom the information that's available in that little tiny piece. So that was a huge challenge. And then finding the next challenge was jumping into pharmaceutical. I've worked in facilities that have created oral solutions, pills, injectables, and working with especially in the injectables, there's no room for error or contamination. And so there's always that aspect of challenge there to make sure that we're meeting every guideline and standard along the way, but still being innovative enough to make the next piece.
Gotcha. And I think that is a very, that's a very interesting journey. And I hear it very common with entrepreneurs. We're saying, there was more that I knew that I was capable and wanted to do. And it's just like the first path they chose wasn't it. And I think a lot of people struggle with that sometimes. It's like, how do I know if I'm choosing the right path? And I think just that, that sense of just, try this. And if you don't feel the fit, it's okay if you change it.
Yeah, and that's really where I built my company, my brand on, is that take the leap, make that change, and spin your own fate.
And so, go ahead.
I was going to say that's where, so the Moirae Group is actually change management consulting, and that works whether you're just starting out and you need to implement a new process, but it also works if you're already established, but you need that level of growth. What can you change to get where you want to be?
Now, speaking of that, when it comes down to change, which, a lot of times people are a little apprehensive to change. So, have you seen there be any common, or you say commonality behind like why clients may not be as willing to make that change, or any pushback that they give to making that change?
It's usually comfort. When you're sitting there and this is how I've run my business like this, and I know it works, even though it's not perfect. And you start challenging that level of comfort and bringing them into a new realm of, instead of doing X, Y, and Z that you've done for 5 years, we're going to throw in, and now you're going to do A, B, and C instead.
Wow.
They're just like, well, like that, it's a fear.
Hmm.
But that fear is, it's one of those things like, if you're always afraid of failure, you're never going to hit true success, right? You have to jump above that level of potential mediocrity, because it works, but it could be better. And a lot of these changes are not going to be dramatic. We're going to flip your business around in 3 days and all of a sudden it's a whole new thing. It's going to be creating processes and workflows that we slowly implement. Just like going on a diet, you're not going to go on a craze 30-day diet, lose 50 pounds, because then you're just going to bounce back. So we make systematic changes, hit the processes at the core of the business, and then start to expand those out so that they're small, they're bite-sized, they're easily understood by everyone in the business who needs to adopt them. And creating those small steps really eliminates a lot of that fear, because you can see, okay, here's my next milestone. Here's the end of this phase before you give them the whole picture, right? It's like the analogy of, you can't climb a mountain until you take the first step, or don't make a mountain out of a molehill. Instead of giving them the mountain, we're going to give them small molehills. Let them take those small steps.
Awesome.
But really just looking to eliminate that fear in the change that they need to make in order to grow and succeed.
Awesome. Now, are you seeing, because of COVID-19, that people are a little bit more open to changing, or are people still having, somewhat of a similar disposition about change?
I'd say it's a complete mixed bag. We're at 50-50 with it. A lot of people understand that, oh my goodness, I need to change. If I'm going to stay alive in this with my business, I need to make changes. And then there's the other people that are like, we'll weather the storm, we'll get through it, and we're going to do the same thing when we get there.
Gotcha. Now, speaking of your business, what are the types of services that you provide?
So I will do project management as a service, basically be an interim project manager to help with a single project, task, or division. Also going into the change management consulting and working with the top level managers or owners of a company and creating that systematic change, even down to creating business plans, market research, and diving into that financial analysis for an entrepreneur to pick up the pieces and actually make progress. And I think that one's a particular struggle right now, because it's so unclear what the economy is going to look like in 2 weeks to 2 years. But smaller services may be, a resume or pitch deck. Obviously, like I said, creating that business plan. And then sometimes it's even just going to be interview practice. If you are an entrepreneur and you need to go and you're trying to interview an investor, let's sit there and let's practice. Get that fear of speaking out of the way.
Awesome. Now, where can people find you online or on social media to get in touch with you?
So I am on Instagram at the Moirae G. And so Moirae is spelled Moirae, and G being for group. So the Moirae Group. The same thing on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. The Moirae Group is a page on LinkedIn. And then obviously the moiraeg.com is the website. So I tried to make sure that I kept everything. As long as you can figure out how to spell Moirae, we're there. And the key piece behind the name, even if you're ever into Greek mythology, the Moirae Group refers to the Moirae sisters, and they were considered the spinners of fate. And I like to empower big or small businesses to take control, spin their fate the way they want to, create their business for the future, and not just accept the cards that have been dealt.
Awesome. And speaking of that, I think when you hear people use that analogy of like, using the cards in the hand that you were dealt, I mean, usually in everyone's hand, there are some challenges that they face. So were there any particular challenges that you faced in, with your business and navigating the journey of your business that you hit and you were just like, hey, we have to figure this out or if we're going to move forward?
Absolutely. I'd say, some of the early on challenges are building the confidence to break out. There's always people in every career path who are going to tell you, oh, you're not ready. You don't do that. Or, oh, even sometimes the female piece of it, someone will be like, oh, why don't you find somebody nice that you can work for?
Wow.
And so like, there's been different comments throughout my career that have made me second guess whether or not this is something I could even do. So that was a big mental challenge. I would say in terms of the rest of just having the challenge of starting the business, when to really make the jump, how to advertise it, how to reach the key people. And one of the big things I have found is that I need to break away from regular social media and really dive into LinkedIn more. And, I'm looking for people that are willing to make that change, who are already looking for information or ways to make that change. So I don't want to ever be looked at as a get rich quick scheme. And so finding that right marketing niche was a huge challenge. And I think something that is still, it's constantly evolving. What worked for me 6 months ago isn't working the greatest right now. So that's something that needs to be adopted as we go. And I'm going to practice what I preach, and we're going to change to create the future.
Awesome. Awesome. Now, before we wrap up, the question that I like to ask every guest that comes on is, when you think about, your rich history as from your profession and even into your entrepreneurial career and even helping entrepreneurs, what are 2 lessons that you've kind of learned in your journey that you think other entrepreneurs need to grasp these lessons if they want to be successful?
So I'd say big one is to accept failure, because failure is not final. It's okay that not everyone wants to do business with you or be part of your business. Understanding that just because there's 10,000 businesses in your state or in your market region that you could reach doesn't mean you're going to get a yes every time you talk to one of them. And especially early on, before you have a name for yourself, that's going to be a challenge. And that's something that I noticed too, is, it was very disheartening. I'm pitching, and everyone's telling me no. So that failure early on wasn't truly a failure. It was just a brick in the road that needed to be stepped over. And then second one, I'd have to say that would be to stay true to yourself. There's, you can be the image of what you think people want you to be. And that goes beyond business into life too. But as a business, you figure out what your market niche is based on who you are. I'm not going to create a market niche around a group of people that I don't connect with.
Wow.
And so that gives me the opportunity. I'm building a business around a need I saw, but something that I was also passionate about, something that I saw was constantly a struggle from business to business that I worked with, that, the way they did things was the way maybe their CEO, who'd been doing business for 30 years, did it back in the 90s. Doesn't always work today.
Wow.
Especially with technology, we need to be able to grow and expand.
Awesome. Well, Andrea, thank you so much for, sharing your story and telling us a little bit about your business and, the wisdom that you shared. I so agree and think that the points you made are phenomenal, great points that every entrepreneur should grasp. And we'll definitely include the one pager so people can find you more on LinkedIn and your other outlets and follow the story about what's going on and get in touch with you when they need your services. So thank you for coming on the show.
Absolutely, Terrell. It was a pleasure. And if there's any questions that come up, I'm absolutely happy to answer them as they come through. I am honored to be part of this podcast, and thank you for sharing your time with me.
Thanks for tuning in to the Business Talk Library. If you like what you heard and you want to hear more, be sure to click the subscribe button and follow us on all social media platforms as the Business Talk Library.